Welcome to Iron Butterfly Podcast. My name is Megan Jaffer.
And I'm Katie Hopkins, and we'll be your hosts.
We created Iron Butterfly Podcast in honor of Eloise Page, the original Iron Butterfly. 80 years ago, Eloise joined the Office of Strategic Services, trailblazing a path for what ultimately became the United States intelligence community. She rose the ranks from secretary to case officer, defying the norms of her time, and eventually became the first female chief of station at CIA. Eloise was known among her colleagues to be a fierce fighter with a core of steel, and she earned the codename Iron Butterfly. Our podcast continues her legacy, inviting the unsung heroines of the United States intelligence community to share their stories with aspiring leaders like you. So tonight or today, depending on when you're listening, on this episode of Iron Butterfly Podcast, we are very pleased to welcome Diana Burley. She is the Vice Provost for Research and Innovation at American University, and Diana has embraced exciting challenges and collaborative projects that fuel her passion for innovation. She has also enjoyed her previous roles as professor at Syracuse and as program director at the National Science Foundation, and we look forward to hearing about that. Self-described as funny, thoughtful, devoted, generous, and resilient, Diana balances her professional life with personal passions like listening to audiobooks, spending time with her dog, entertaining, and decorating. Well, welcome, Diana.
Thank you.
Thank
you to be here.
Oh, we are thrilled that you said yes. I know this kind of, it took us a few times to get it on the schedule, but we did, and we're so happy that you're here. And so I'm not sure, not everyone has listened to the podcast before coming on, but we always joke that we kind of like to start from the beginning. We want to really know who you are and where you came from, because we think that's important to a person's story. Before we started, I shared with you, Katie and I are not from inside the Beltway. For those listeners not in the know of what the Beltway is, meaning, in the Virginia, Maryland, and D.C. area. And so we want to hear kind of your start story. Where are you from? Where'd you grow up? How did you kind of get to where you are today?
Oh, boy. Well, I actually was born here.
Oh,
I was born in D.C., but I wasn't raised here.
Okay.
So I don't consider myself to be from D.C. I'm from Pittsburgh.
I love Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
I love Pittsburgh.
What do you love about Pittsburgh?
Me?
Yeah.
So I'm from Chicago, for people who don't know, and people think I'm nuts when I say that Pittsburgh is my number 2 city aside from Chicago.
Really?
Yes, because I just feel like they're real people. They're down-to-earth people. Yeah. They work hard. They have good values, and I don't know. I just feel like it's most alike to Chicago in the Midwest, and so that's why I love it.
Pittsburgh's very Midwestern.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's big enough to have things to do, but small enough that you still feel like it's homey in a community. And so, yeah, I'm from Pittsburgh. My whole family's there. I'm one of the few that don't live there.
Are you a sports fan?
Well, I'm from Pittsburgh.
I was going to. Well, I didn't want to assume.
It's
in your blood.
I'm just saying we're 3-0 right now. I'm just putting it out there.
I love it. So Pittsburgh kind of raised you. That's where,
Pittsburgh raised me.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so tell me about school. Like, what were you interested in, and what, what ultimately brought you to college and what you studied in college?
Yeah. I think when I was growing up, I really wanted to be a lawyer. That's what I thought I was going to do. I don't know why. Maybe I like to argue. Maybe that was it. I don't know. But I thought I was going to be a lawyer. And so I went through high school, was in the band, was in student government.
What did you play?
I played clarinet.
Oh my gosh, amazing. I did too.
Really?
Oh my
gosh. There you go. Yes, played clarinet, marched, did all that good stuff. Was treasurer of my senior class.
Oh.
Yeah, very, very important.
I mean, it holds the money.
Yeah,
so.
honestly.
Exactly. And then I came back to DC. I
Okay.
say back because I was born here, but I came here for college.
Oh, okay.
So I went to Catholic University, and I was an econ major and thought that I was going to go to law school, but I started playing around with computers. This was in the 80s. And I started to like the computers. And so I ended up going back to Pittsburgh to grad school to Carnegie Mellon, which is all computers all the time.
Yeah.
And I was there for a very long time.
So you were an econ major for undergrad,
Yeah.
and then computer science,
And then I went to CMU. My first master's degree is in public administration, public management, but I focused on information systems, on technology. And then I have a second master's in organization science because I was very interested in how technology was being used inside of companies. And then my doctorate is in the two combined.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
Can we talk more about organizational science? I've never heard that phrase.
Yeah. It's really the study of organization structures, how they function, how cultures are built within organizations, how people engage, how they transform. So it's, I don't know, a lot of people might find it to be boring, but I always thought it was fascinating because I was always interested in the people part of technology, and the people are who make up the organizations. And so it was like, all right, what's this technology going to do to the people? And how are the people going to shape the way the technology is used? And so putting the two together just made sense.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. What was it that drew you to the technology side of that?
I don't know. I was just fascinated. I mean, being in the late 80s, this is when personal computers were, really in everybody's home, but you didn't know how to do a whole lot with them. And I just found them to be interesting and powerful. And I was just really curious as to how people would use them to be productive. I was really interested in the fact that it seemed that a lot of companies were pushing their use, but there were a lot of people who didn't have access to them.
Yeah.
And so what was that going to do to them and their ability to engage? I tell this story a lot when I give talks about my grandmother, and I was in grad school and I was doing some project or something, and I was talking to my grandmother who lived in Pittsburgh. Everybody was there, and I was really excited because I was talking about, oh, Grandma, everybody's going to have these computers and it's going to be great. And I was doing research in electronic government. So when they're putting government services online, like today, it's normal, right? You just go to Fairfax County and you pay your taxes, right? But that wasn't the case then. And so I was telling her, I was really excited. And I remember she just looked at me and she said, but how am I going to get my Social Security check? And I have to go see Bob. And right, I mean, it wasn't just her check, but there was a whole community around going to the office. And
it was like an experience.
It was an experience, and it was a community, it was people. And it wasn't until then, because I was so immersed in all the nerds, right? I mean, we're just like, technology is great. And I was so immersed that it didn't occur to me that it might not be exciting for everybody. And that everybody may not want or be able to use it. And that interaction that night just totally changed my view. And I just kept going, but then I kept going with, what's Grandma going to say about this? How would this impact, And so and today I sit, and those are the questions. Those are the kind of questions that I ask. And
I think it's still relevant today because there are still technologies that kind of transform the way people do things every day, like new technologies.
I had a visitor this morning. I had a guest. We were talking about AI.
Yeah.
And we were talking about the algorithms and the data that's used to train the models, and how there's bias in them, and it impacts, and people don't think that there's bias in it. And especially as it becomes mainstream, right? I mean, somebody like me asks questions because it's what I do. But when Chat GPT or some other AI system is just out there and people are just using it, lay people are not going to think, well, I wonder who put the data in to train this model. And I wonder if there was bias in that data.
Yeah.
And I wonder if there's bias in the algorithm and who really wrote the algorithm, right? And so people aren't going to think that. They're going to think, technology told me this. I asked the technology an answer, and it said that I should give her a loan and I shouldn't give him a loan. That I should, do X and not do Y, right? And they won't think about the fact that the answer that got spit out came from something.
Yeah.
And so that is concerning to me, right? Because if we just rely on technology that is inherently biased, but we don't treat it as such, what does that do to the people who are malaffected?
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm kind of stitching this thought together as I say it, but sometimes we talk about, so Carmen, one of our Iron Butterflies, she talks about mail-ordered systems a lot. And what she means by that is like you have these institutions whose culture has been transformed by the class that basically created those systems, right? And a lot of our systems, what not good, not bad, were created by men, right?
Right.
And I think it's easier to see that when it's an organization because we see them made up of humans, and like culture in the human context, I think is much more, it's like simpler to comprehend versus like technology almost feels authoritative. And like you can't see
We
that.
trust it.
Yeah,
We believe it.
trust it. That's right. That's right. So it's kind of interesting. I had never thought about that intersection before.
Yeah.
So you did you go straight through like for both masters?
I did.
Oh
I was
my
in school for a
goodness.
very
You
long
were
time.
Oh my gosh. So you finally finish
Yeah.
and you have your 3 degrees. And so 4.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
At
So
29.
So then what was next? Like, did you know what you wanted to do next? And where
I wanted to be a researcher.
Okay.
Yeah. But I became a professor.
Okay.
So I taught and I did research, and I moved to Bloomington, Indiana.
Oh,
I was
so
a
the
professor at
Midwest.
Indiana University.
Oh, very nice.
And I was there for 4 years, had 2 kids, husband. I should mention him.
You can put him in there.
He
Yeah.
was important in the story. And he actually, we both became professors at IU.
Oh, okay.
And had 2 kids, and then left IU and went to Syracuse and was a professor there, and then came back to DC and went to the National Science Foundation and left the husband in Syracuse, brought the kids.
Okay. There you
Never
go.
left DC. Yeah.
And go ahead. Sorry.
No, I mean, I'm curious, like how, because I think when I think of universities in my mind, I'm like, oh, they're all just like roughly the same, right? Like, did you find really substantial differences in each of the universities that you were in?
Yeah.
Like what was that like?
I mean, yes, universities have personalities. And so at the time, Carnegie Mellon was very rough, very, kind of combative, in the best possible way, but very, you learned how to fight. And I don't mean physically fight, but like fight for your ideas. And you learned that you had to be very rigorous in your rationale and your methodology. And, it was just a very tense place. IU, I mean, Bobby Knight was still there, it's basketball and it was fun. And so, it was a Big Ten university, a whole different vibe. Syracuse was kind of a blend of the two because it was smaller, but it had big sports. But people were, you're kind of isolated up there. And so but they all have different personalities. Even, I've been at GW, I've been at AU now, and every university has a different personality. Sometimes it's in part based on where it is geographically, but I think it's just the way that we as people approach our work and what we believe is most important in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Did you feel like those different characters of the universities like brought out different pieces of you?
Yeah. but almost opposite. Like, I talk about the kind of combativeness or hard, challenging environment at CMU now in a positive way, but I didn't like it then. I used to the building that my office was in was an old factory from the Andrew Carnegie days, and so it was slanted because they would assemble big machines, and it would start here and they would just roll it down the hill. And I would never go in that front door because it was like I felt like I was a tunnel and it was getting smaller and smaller because I was getting more and more anxiety filled as I would get to my office because I didn't know what I was going to face. But of course, when I left, I'm like, you need to be more like this. But in other places that are not as combative, I find myself saying, you really need to toughen up. You need, right? And so it's almost like I take a lesson from one place and I use it in the other. And I think it makes me well-rounded. Yeah, at least that's like a nice in my mind, that's what I say. So.
That's awesome. Okay, so let's talk about the National Science Foundation.
Yeah.
Tell us what it is. So for people who don't know, and tell us, what the purpose, what the mission is, and then tell us a little bit about what you've done there and what you're doing.
So the National Science Foundation is a federal agency. It is the federal agency that focuses on science, on research, on science education, and it's really there to advance American competitiveness. The whole purpose of what they do is to provide funding to researchers and educators to advance scientific discovery. That's so all of the different scientific discoveries that you see in the, around the world, some of the money probably came at some point from NSF. And so I was a program officer. I gave away money for computer science education programs, focused on cybersecurity education programs. That's really where I started to focus my own research in that space. Mm-hmm. And I worked there for about 3 years. And, it was a wonderful, if you're a scientist, well, I should say for me, as a scientist, I found it to be incredibly rewarding because I both was able to shape programs and to shape the way that other scientists would be advancing their work, because I helped to shape what those programs would give funding for. But I also got to nurture young scientists.
Oh, that's cool.
And mentor them because, the success rate is very low. It always hovers around 20%. Sometimes it's a little lower than that. And certainly for different types of audiences, it's even lower. And so my favorite part of the job was they have these things, they still have them, they're called NSF Days, and it's when you collectively go to a region of the country and you just talk and you help people understand the nature of the foundation, how to write grants, how to get your ideas across, how to communicate in a way that is not just interesting to someone in your field, but outside of your field. Because when your proposals are reviewed, it's always going to be, if it's a computer science education proposal, it'll be a computer scientist, but they may not do anything related
to what
you do,
right,
and what you're proposing to do. So you have to be able to communicate in a way that is compelling and rigorous and clear. And I really liked helping faculty members around the country do that. right? Communicate. And that's probably how I ended up being a vice provost for research now. Is that, I just enjoyed helping move people's ideas forward.
That's such a cool mission.
Yes. I mean, in a way, what we're trying to do ultimately, like there are a couple things we're trying to do with Iron Butterfly. One is obviously uplift the voices of women, but we started a 501c3, the Iron Butterfly Foundation, and that's what we want to do as well, is help and mentor. We were very lucky that people helped us. We come from the intelligence community. We knew nothing about podcasting, nothing about documentaries, nothing about producing or directing. And we were coached, we were mentored, we were taught by people that did know, and we want to pay it forward. So we love that is at the core of who you are too.
Yeah.
So we were introduced to you by someone in the intelligence community. That's how we met. And so I'm wondering where the crossover there is. Why, where the, is there one? So tell us about that.
I actually interact with a lot of people in the intelligence community because of my work in cyber.
Gotcha.
So I started at NSF. When I started at NSF, I started focusing on cybersecurity, education, workforce development. But what that did is that took me into a lot of spaces, a lot of the three-letter agencies that needed people who could do that kind of work. And so I began to move in those circles. And so even now, I do a lot of strategy work in helping agencies, companies, any kind of really organization think strategically about their cybersecurity workforce needs today, tomorrow, how they approach the broad awareness that needs to happen across their workforce, across their organization, what that means for their mission, how do they adapt their culture. So a lot of my organizational expertise comes into play because it's an organizational transformation to think about security in a different way.
Yeah. And it's good that you kind of come from outside of that box, right? You need that outsider, whether it's one of the agencies, whether it's a company, where you're not in it, right?
Exactly. Because we talk to ourselves a lot.
Right.
Yeah. So it's, my job has always been, going back to my grandmother, this translation role, right? Where it's helping people who aren't in the space understand the space. And that goes both directions. And so part of the reason why I've been successful in the tech space is because when I go into a room of technologists, I speak their language, and I speak their language enough to get them to listen to me so that I can tell them and help them understand the people who do not speak your language are not ignoring you. They're not unintelligent. They're not ignorant of the critical nature of the threat or anything. They just have different priorities and they have different things on their mind. So you have to speak to them in a way that meets them where they are so that you can bring them along. And I find that
is such an art.
It is truly an art. And whether I'm doing it in cyber or research or anything else, I haven't figured it out with my kids. But other than that, I've been pretty successful at it. So, yeah.
So you have had the opportunity to see so many different types of organizations in your role. I'm curious, how, and also you came to work in the intelligence community relatively later in your career, right? So when you first started working with the intelligence community, what were assumptions that you had made about the community, or and were those true or proven untrue as you kind of got to know those types of organizations? I'm just kind of curious, how the intelligence community was similar to or different from all of the other organizations that you've worked with.
I watch movies and TV like everybody else. And so I think that, and it's sad because I was a grown person, right? But I still had this idea that they weren't real people, like that went to shop at Target and
yeah,
right. That part of them never crossed my mind. Like that part didn't exist. And I realized, they do shop at Target. I'm not going to say which Target, no, but yeah, I think just everybody is regular, right? And the more you live, the more you realize that.
Yeah.
Everybody is the same. We all have the same challenges. We all shop the same places. We all have kids and dogs and parents and flat tires and,
difficulties, highs and lows.
Exactly.
And, we have aging parents. We have
exactly.
all of this stuff.
We're all in the same boat.
Yeah.
And because of the mystique, I think that's not something that you think about. But yeah, that was the big, everybody's the same.
It's so interesting because that's one of the things we've been trying to do with this podcast. And, we have produced and directed a documentary about women in the intelligence community. Mm-hmm. And one of the key, you would have had no idea that this was true, but you basically said the goal of what we're trying to fight is that, it's not like James Bond. And
wouldn't it be cool if it was?
Yes, of course. Like martini drinking, gun toting, parties all the time, in like French chateaus.
Yeah.
So it was good. It's
TDY
good.
is not fun.
Yeah.
You're running through Dulles just like everybody else, right?
That is right. That is exactly right. So it's good to hear it coming from you as well. Like,
I'm also wondering, you talked a little bit about how you have to understand different priorities of the groups that you work with and like speak in your language. Like, what is the intelligence language? Like, what are the priorities? I'm just curious, as someone who has kind of come into this community and sees all types of organizations, all types of problems. Like, how do they think about problems differently, or are they trying to solve the same things?
The essence of the challenge is exactly like everybody. Everybody thinks that their issue is the most important issue. And so in the intelligence community, but this is national security, this is not right. And it's like, okay.
Yeah, I get it.
Now let's go another layer deeper, right? Because when I'm in the hospital, it's people are going to die. People are going to die, right?
Or it could be banks. You're like,
banks,
we'll lose all your
money, right?
Yeah.
And
that's such a great perspective.
Again, they're just like everybody else. You think your thing is the most important, and it is to you.
Yeah.
But what you have to recognize is that if the way that you present yourself to the world is my thing is the most important and your thing is there only to serve my thing, you're not going to make any friends. And in some times and in some places, you don't need to make friends. You come in with your big hammer and you say, this is the way it's going to be.
Yeah.
But those places and spaces are becoming fewer and fewer and fewer. And so everyone, regardless of whether they're national security or they're physicians or they're educators, we all are getting into this democratization of knowledge and information and technology availability, access, which means that we have to be ever more cognizant of the fact that our needs are just that. They're our needs, and our priorities are just that. They're our priorities. And sometimes they align with who we're talking to, and sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
And when you recognize that and when you approach people in that way, you're able to get to that place that you want to be much faster.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's like there's no like objective experience. Like your experience is different than my experience is different than your experience, and like all of those things can be true at the same time.
They are all true at the same time. I give a talk sometimes, and I put up a picture of a dandelion in its flower form. I don't say it's a dandelion. I just show a yellow flower, and I say to people, okay, what is this, right? And so we say, oh, it's a yellow flower. Okay, what if I tell you it's a dandelion? What do you think? Like, what's the first? And inevitably, there's some people that are like, oh,
it's a weed,
it's
or
a
something,
weed.
yeah.
And then there's other people that are just like, oh, it was a pretty yellow flower. And there's other people that say, dandelion tea is the healthiest tea.
Yeah.
And, right?
It's good. I
love
love dandelion
right?
tea.
Exactly, right? And so what you realize is that everything is about perspective.
Yeah.
And if all of the dandelion weed people sit on the left side of the room and all of the dandelion tea people sit on the right side of the room, and you just continue to circle, right? You never recognize that there's valid and legitimate other perspectives, right? It's not as if somebody's looking at it and saying it's a bug or it's a, something that it is objectively not, right? It's not a picture on a wall. It's an actual natural flower, but it is objectively a health food. It is objectively a weed in the lawn, right? It is objectively a yellow flower. So who's right? And what does it mean?
Yeah.
And that's the way that you have to approach life. It's like there are some objective truths, but there are also some places where there are multiple objective truths for one entity. And in those situations, how do you decide who's quote unquote right?
Yeah.
And what does it mean if we're all right? How do we then approach it, right? And that's a real
That could be
question.
extrapolated to like everything.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, man, I'm glad you're a provost. And you're leading and you're teaching our youth, because that's what I want people. That's what I would want my kids hearing and thinking about, and I love that.
Well, American University
is right around the corner. I know.
Always recruiting.
No, we've had family members who've gone. I personally didn't, but I've had family members who went to law school there. But it's a good transition. You told us that we asked you what your favorite job has been, and you said that it's now.
Yeah.
And so tell us a little bit about why and what it means. What does it mean in your position? What are you doing?
I think it's my favorite job because I get to do all of the different things that I have found over time I enjoy.
Yeah.
So I have found I really like to mentor early career faculty, right? And to help them navigate the world of research and sponsored research, and I get to do that. I like to do my own research. And I mean, I'm a researcher, I'm a scientist at my core, and I get to do that. I like to teach. I don't do that very much, but I do get to do it. And I also believe very passionately that there is a right way and a wrong way to run an organization, right? I'm very opinionated. And I get to do that too, right? And so I get to build my research enterprise, or the research enterprise for the university reflects the priorities that I have, that I believe serve the faculty, staff, and students. And ultimately, I'm here to change the world. That's, I think, in our own way, that's what we're all trying to do. And I feel like I get to do that every day. And that's great.
Man, that was a good answer.
Well, it's a nice segue to a question that we typically like to ask, which is, we talk about the butterfly effect a lot.
Yeah.
Which is this idea that these like small actions can actually cascade and build over time. Like we've had the opportunity to talk to so many women who have just had like an outsized impact on the world. And like for you, when you say like, I'm here to change the world, like what are ways that you feel like you do that? Like, how does that manifest for you?
Mm-hmm. So I'll tell a story. I won't mention a name or an agency or a university, but at one of my universities, I had a young Hispanic student come to me. I was very new at the university, and she was very interested in going to graduate school, study cyber, and she had been discouraged and told that that wasn't really for her. And she had gotten accepted to Carnegie Mellon. So I had a very strong opinion about that. Mm-hmm. And I actually took her. I put her in my car, and I took her to campus. I put her in my parents' house that night so that she could go and do her thing. My brother has apartments in the city, and so I convinced him that we really needed to help this young woman and got her an apartment at, a little bit lower rate. And just recently, she graduated, did great things, but just recently I ran into her at a meeting, and we were speaking on a panel together, and I speak on a lot of panels, so that won't give it away. And one of my colleagues said to me, "Oh, Diana, I want to introduce you to
so-and-so.
So-and-so." I said, "Oh, okay." And I turn around to meet so-and-so, and she throws her arms around me and hugs me. And I couldn't see her at that point, right? Because she's hugging me, and I'm like,
who is this?
Who's this person? And then when I looked, I said, "Oh my God, this is one of my kids," right? And she is now a senior executive in a company and has influenced so many. Mm-hmm. And so, right? And I didn't do it for any other, honestly, I was mad.
Yeah.
Right? I was mad that she had not been encouraged the way that she should have been.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of a spur. If I had thought about it longer, I probably wouldn't have done it, right? But I just was like, I'll take you, before I even thought about what I was saying and that I would have to do what I said I would do. I was like, uh-oh. But bigger than speaking at Davos or doing that, right? I mean, all those things are great, but that influenced that person who now influences so many people. And that's why we do what we do.
That's such
Perfect.
a great story.
Perfect.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So for someone who is a listener, wants to serve in the intelligence community or support the intelligence community, but loves research and science and academia, like what would you recommend to them? Like, to maybe ask an open-ended question, like, can you support the intelligence community from a research, science, academic standpoint? And like, what does that look like?
Yeah. Honestly, it looks like every other industry in terms of it's not about the fundamental research, it's about the context in which the research is applied. Mm. And so there are a lot of institutions that do classified research, that whether they are part of the government, like a national defense university type of place, or even just a regular university that you would think of where they can do that kind of research as well. Not all of the research is necessarily classified, right? I mean, there's a lot of work that has to get done. Intelligence community agencies or organizations too, right? So the fundamental ideas around organizational transformation or design or structure or those kinds, right? It's just another instance. And so, I always tell people, regardless of the field that they want to go in or the context that they want to go in, the first thing you have to do is do your work. You have to be excellent. And focusing on that, and then focus on where you feel most comfortable. And I don't mean comfortable in terms of people are nice to you, because sometimes you're comfortable because you're doing what you believe you need to be doing, and people aren't nice to you, but you stay and you do it because you believe that that's what you're meant to do. And people aren't always going to be nice to you. But if you're following your passion, then you keep going. Yeah. And so, because I did a session a couple of weeks ago for early career faculty, and they asked about my journey and all that. And I said, listen, I sit here today, but don't be confused. I have long sleeves on. You can't see the cuts and bruises and Band-Aids and such, right? But they're there.
Yeah.
And I'm better for them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I feel like, I always am sad towards the end because I'm like, we could talk forever.
Her face just drop?
Well, because I feel like, it's funny because I definitely feel that way, but we've also heard the listeners say, we always want more. Like, we keep it to 45 minutes to an hour because we want people to be able to listen in the car or whatever. But they always say, I want more. And my response is, I want more too. Like, I want to talk to this person longer. So that's how I feel. But we are coming to the end. But as you know, and we've kind of warned you, we do ask one final question, which is in keeping with the name of our podcast, Iron Butterfly, who is named after Eloise Page. If you could give yourself a code name, what would it be and why?
Yeah, I've thought a lot about this, and I struggled. And so I'm going to steal one from my girlfriend who, we've talked about this together, and we've said, it's like a steel fist inside of a velvet glove.
Oh, wow.
Because it's, you have to be diplomatic and, in terms of meeting people where they are and helping to translate, right? So you have to be smooth and soft. But that doesn't mean weak, right? You still have to be strong. And so that's what I use.
That is good.
But I didn't come up with it.
I might have to steal from you.
It reminds me of Tish had a similar
velvet
hammer.
Oh, yeah. Velvet hammer.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you're in very good company.
Yes.
Okay.
With your code
Wonderful.
name. Yeah. She explained it similarly.
I love that. That is good. And I like that you have talked about it with your friend.
Yes.
And yeah.
I think people sometimes think those are like mutually exclusive things.
Yeah.
Like you either have to be like
the
hard,
tough,
like the steel hand, or you have to be the velvet glove.
I think when they think of velvet glove, people think that's meek, right? You have to be meek, right? And to your description and explanation, you do not have to be. You can be both. And those are good people. Well, we could not thank you enough for joining us. This was really special. We thank you for saying yes and joining us, and we hope we see you again soon.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
This has been an episode of Iron Butterfly Podcast. To learn more about Iron Butterfly Media, visit our website at www.ironbutterflymedia.com. If you like the show, please be sure to rate, review, and subscribe, and follow Iron Butterfly on social media for bonus content. You can also support us on Patreon. Lastly, we want to thank our producer, Amanda Young, and the entire Iron Butterfly team. Stay fierce, and we'll talk next time.